Happy Tuesday, everybody. Welcome to another episode of China Update, where we discuss leading political, economic, and geostrategic analysis on the world's number 2 economy. My name is Tony. Let's jump in. And first up, the World Health Organization has reiterated that all theories surrounding the origins of COVID-19 remain viable, following the release of a long-awaited report by its Scientific Advisory Group for the Origins of Novel Pathogens, SAGO. The report, published over the weekend, failed to deliver definitive answers more than 4 years after the virus first emerged, but pointed the finger for the state of affairs directly at China for refusing to grant access to critical data. Speaking at a press conference, WHO Director General Dr. Tedros emphasized the need for transparency. Quote, "As things stand, all hypotheses must remain on the table, including spillover and lab leak," end quote, he said. He expressed deep frustration at China's refusal to share key data, including hundreds of viral sequences from early COVID-19 cases, detailed records of animals sold at Wuhan markets, and the information regarding research and biosafety conditions at Wuhan laboratories. Some argue that China's years-long refusal to do these simple things should be treated as an admission of guilt. And indeed, some Western institutions have already come out saying that a lab leak and a subsequent cover-up by the Chinese authorities remains the most likely explanation. The SAGO acknowledged some progress in understanding the origins of the virus, but its report stressed that a full evaluation remains impossible without access to this missing information. Quote, "Much of the information needed to evaluate fully all hypotheses has not been provided," end quote, the advisory group concluded. The comments sparked anger in Beijing. China's National Health Commission responded sharply to the WHO's statements, accusing the report of being influenced by political agendas. Quote, "With manipulation and influence from certain countries and individuals, the report has included false information based on subjective speculation," end quote, it said. Beijing further criticized the report for making, quote, "groundless requirements for China," end quote, which it claims, quote, "undermine scientific inquiry," end quote. Of course, the obvious response would be, if you feel you have been falsely accused, then this information being provided to the WHO would be the fastest and surest way to evidence that innocence. The fact 4 years later that it's still withheld after repeated requests from the WHO is very telling. Next up, we move to the Chinese economy. China's manufacturing sector shrunk for a third consecutive month in June, with the official Manufacturing Purchasing Managers Index PMI edging up to 49.7 from May's 49.5. The reading, just below the 50-point threshold that separates expansion from contraction, shows once again ongoing pressure from weak domestic demand and lingering US tariffs, even as a recent trade truce offers a modicum of relief. The official data, released yesterday by the National Bureau of Statistics, marks the first full-month snapshot since China and the US agreed to a 90-day ceasefire in Geneva to ease trade tensions. This was later reinforced during the so-called London talks. China's non-manufacturing PMI, which includes services and construction, edged up to 50.5 in June from 50.3, slightly beating forecasts and offering some balance to manufacturing weakness. Still, economists remain cautious. Analysts like Zichun Huang of Capital Economics warned that weaker exports and a fading fiscal impulse could weigh on growth in the second half of the year. Goldman Sachs expects no major stimulus announcements, predicting any new measures will be narrowly targeted. Meanwhile, in a piece called "China Chooses Deflation," not by devaluing in response to US tariffs, China allows itself to fall into deflation, published a few days ago, Robin J. Brooks, senior fellow at the Brookings Institute, former chief economist at the IIF, and chief FX strategist at Goldman Sachs, argues, quote, "China was on the verge of deflation before US tariffs hit. Headline inflation in China fell below zero toward the end of 2024. US tariffs will only hasten this deflationary dynamic. The way to counter this deflationary dynamic would be to ease monetary policy, but an inevitable byproduct of such easing is the fall of the yuan against the dollar. China doesn't want that, so it's instead making a choice to accept deflation. The de facto peg of the yuan against the dollar means China is bumping up against the impossible trinity, whereby it's impossible to have independent monetary policy amid an exchange rate peg and capital mobility. China, of course, has capital controls, but capital flight periodically rears its head. The decision not to devalue against the dollar, therefore, has very real adverse consequences. It makes a fall into deflation much more likely," end quote. Meanwhile, China's home sales continued their downward slide in June, showing China's years-long housing crisis really is a catastrophe for the country. The 100 largest developers recorded 339 billion yuan, $47.3 billion in new home sales last month, down 23% from a year earlier, according to preliminary data from China Real Estate Information Corp. The decline follows an 8.6% annual drop in May, although sales rose 14.7% month-on-month in June. The housing market has been mired in a downturn for 4 years, with fading effects from last September's stimulus measures. Premier Li Qiang recently pledged renewed efforts to revive the sector, which analysts view as critical to boosting domestic consumption and cushioning the economy against rising external pressures, including US tariffs. Still, major policy shifts are unlikely. Quote, "More support will be needed, but we don't expect a big shift in approach," end quote, said Duncan Wrigley of Pantheon Macroeconomics, adding, quote, "China is resigned to a slow recovery," end quote. Even a modest recovery may not reverse long-term trends. Goldman Sachs estimates that demand for new homes in cities could remain 75% below its 2017 peak in the coming years, and it may never return to anywhere near its boom year levels. This is due to shrinking population and much weaker fundamentals. If even half of this turns out to be the case, it would mean the complete end of this engine, China's biggest, of economic growth. Next up, we have two more developments to cover, but just quickly, if you want to continue to be on top of the most up-to-date analysis on China as it's released through grounded and sober analysis, consider subscribing to China Update. Hit the bell notification icon and you will be. 45% of regular viewers are not subscribed, so if you're a regular viewer and you'd like to see the channel grow and make my job much easier, it's just a click of the mouse, but subscribing is a tremendous help. And while you're there, if you're getting some value from today's episode, don't forget to hit the like button. These are just a couple of little things, but it's a huge help for the channel and its growth. If you want to help keep China Update financially sustainable, Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee links are in the description below. Thank you so much, everybody, for all the amazing ongoing support. Next up, today, the 1st of July, is the 104th anniversary of the founding of the Chinese Communist Party. Official data released on the eve of the anniversary recorded party membership at just over 100 million. Up 1.1% from the previous year. Yet the rapid growth of the party has notably slowed, with many attributing this to more stringent recruitment measures under Xi Jinping's rule. Party membership has long been considered a gateway to stable employment in China's sprawling state bureaucracy. Amid sluggish economic growth, record youth unemployment, and a weakening private sector, competition for government positions has surged. Only 2.6 million candidates sat for China's national civil service exams in late December of last year, competing for fewer than 40,000 positions. Despite Xi's aggressive political tightening, including anti-corruption purges, stricter ideological vetting, and mandatory party study sessions, the party remains a magnet for young professionals seeking job security, status, and opportunity. Surveys show that job stability now outweighs salary or prestige for many graduates. On average, party members earn about 20% more than their non-member counterparts and enjoy faster wealth accumulation and preferential access to resources. However, Xi's efforts to restore the party's revolutionary zeal have reportedly also caused some officials to grumble about stifling political rituals and diminished autonomy. This discontent, coupled with stricter screening, has kept the membership growth in check, well below the 3% annual increases seen before Xi took power in 2012. Internationally, party membership has also become a liability too. The US has begun revoking visas for Chinese nationals with alleged party ties, especially in sensitive research fields. Yet at home, the party's influence remains deeply embedded. From ministries to villages, party members oversee virtually all aspects of public life. In this part with this observation today by veteran China analyst Bill Bishop, quote, "When people talk about how much support the party has in China, they should consider how many other people are dependent on each party member. Very quickly, you are into the hundreds of millions of people," end quote. And finally for today, as the 14th Dalai Lama prepares to celebrate his 90th birthday this week on the 6th of July, global attention is turning to what could be a historic announcement regarding his succession, one that may deepen tensions with China. The Tibetan spiritual leader is expected to address the issue during a major 3-day gathering of more than 100 Buddhist religious figures, marking the most significant such assembly since 2019. His succession has long been a source of geopolitical friction, the Chinese Communist Party insisting that it, not the Dalai Lama, or his followers will determine his reincarnation. For Tibetans and many global supporters, the question is not merely religious but existential. The Dalai Lama has made clear that he rejects any successor chosen by Beijing, calling instead for spiritual legitimacy and suggesting his reincarnation may occur outside Chinese-controlled territory, possibly in India, where he has lived in exile since fleeing Tibet in 1959 after a failed uprising against Chinese rule. Quote, "The rest of my life I will dedicate for the benefit of others," end quote, the Dalai Lama said this week, hinting at a coming framework to guide the transition of his institution. Tibetan officials say that unlike in past centuries, preparations for his eventual passing are already in place, which will oversee the search for his reincarnation. Chinese officials, however, have labelled the Dalai Lama a political exile with no right to speak for Tibetans and have indicated they will only engage in talks if he accepts Chinese sovereignty over Tibet and Taiwan, terms the Tibetan government in exile has flatly rejected. Tibetan leaders and exiles fear Beijing will attempt to manipulate the reincarnation process to install a puppet spiritual figure. Quote, "China is trying to garb this institution for its political purpose," end quote, said the Deputy Speaker of Tibet's parliament in exile. As the world watches, Tibetans brace for a new phase in their decades-long struggle for cultural and religious self-determination, one that may soon unfold without the direct presence of their most revered spiritual leader. Okay, that is today's episode of China Update. Thank you so much everybody for watching. Unless something very big happens, there likely will not be an episode tomorrow, so I hope you have a good Tuesday and Wednesday, and I will see you for a new episode on Thursday.